right place at the right time if you want to stretch your mind for technology. Our video does not claim to give medical, legal, political, or financial advice. We offer it solely for your entertainment. The points of view and purpose of this video is not to incite fear, violence, harass, or bully in any way, but to share opinions and thoughts with other like-minded individuals curious about the subject. This encourages conversation and awareness. And this video and our channel from time to time may contain certain copyrighted works that were not authorized to be used by the copyright holder, but which we believe in good faith are protected by federal law and the Copyright Act of 1976. Now, tonight, we're going to be featuring we're going to start off with a few short videos, and we get into some illustrations and some patents. The title of our show tonight is simple, but it's so big. It's so complex. Title: Wetware, Hardware, and Software. Okay, so let's just look at this thing from the computer side. Everybody's familiar with that. The physical structures of most computers is silicon-based. In a human, the equivalent is carbon-based, and we call that wetware, biomolecules, and other living structures. So here we go. We're laying a foundation for what is promises to be a number of episodes. We're going to describe and illustrate some of the new ways in which these two different worlds are coming together from a structural standpoint initially. We'll get into the function later. In this age, we're developing methods to bring the power and connectedness of computer science into living organisms. They're doing it with mice. They're doing it with yeast. They're doing it with bacteria. And you know what? They're doing it with humans, and some of this stuff really works. As well, research is being done on the other front, which is to use biomolecules as more efficient and compact components to replace silicon as a basis for computers. So the merging of these fields is absolutely fascinating, I got to tell you. It is the dawn of a new era. I got a couple little videos here, and there's this first one that I'm going to play. There's one major takeaway that if you perhaps have watched some of our previous episodes, you'd know what I was going for when I show you this. And I don't need to play the whole video. You can watch the whole thing, and it's in the notes. But I'm going to put this thing up. And keep in mind one thing, and I'll give you a clue. It just may have to do with the quantum effects in computing. So here we go. And it's by Tech Planet. Is the end of silicon and the future of computing. And absolutely, definitely where it's going is what we were just talking about.
This leads me to 5 alternative options which may replace silicon in itself. So beginning at number 5, and it's also probably one of the weirdest options out there, and it's the liquid transistor. However, this liquid concept is far from conventional, and it's indeed a bizarre alternative to silicon.
Okay. Right there, we're getting into it. Now, when we think liquid, when we think biomolecules, we're thinking, well, we're 70% water, right? So thinking liquid computing molecules, okay.
These circuits are made of gallium and iridium, and they can react with different voltage inputs. So when the voltage drops in one direction, the droplets close together. And once the voltage is applied in a different direction, the droplets open up. This method is no secret, and multiple institutions are experimenting with this type of liquid metal transistor. Ultimately, you can program different shapes through electromagnetic fields. But keep in mind that this does not...
Okay, so we've hit on a couple of really important points here. Based on the electromagnetic field, we can change the shape of these things. And also, if you consider that if we reach the point that we can do this with water-based biomolecules instead of using gallium arsenide, well, then everything that you're seeing here is something that could be done inside of a living yeast, bacterium, or who knows what other type of stuff. I want to add to that
before you keep going.
Yep.
And what you're really striking at here, which is very important, these are great examples, is this idea of introducing energy and deforming or changing the shape or the morphology, if you want to talk about biology, of something in order to elicit, induce, or measure some type of a stimuli or response.
It's huge. It's huge. That's right.
So
Yep.
go ahead. And so when
Okay.
you're looking at this stuff and you see liquid and you think, okay, I get it, and it's on a chip or whatever. No. What you're seeing is a shape change, a morphology change, a structural change that is known and constant and measured in such a way that it translates into something like an SI relevant form of measurement. And if you
But when you can reshape it, when you can take these little babies and you can reshape them, and I mean, what's here looks like a droplet of mercury or something, but this research is being done in leading up to doing it with different types of molecules. And anyway, we'll go further. I'm not going to have to play this whole thing here.
Structure. I don't think this stuff is going to replace silicon altogether, but this could lead into some very revolutionary robotics that were never conceived before. We get to number 4, nanomagnetics. There are some distinct advantages of solid-state drives compared to magnetic hard drives. But I still think it's quite fascinating to actually see a hard drive work, with millions of magnets incorporated inside of it. Now, a processing chip can utilize a similar type of magnetic technology. This would work thanks to swirling nanoscale tornadoes of magnetism, which can be flowed through complex networks of
Swirly nanoscale tornadoes of magnetism. TMC, you catching this?
Yeah, what he's, I think, talking about is something called an eddy current. And an eddy current is induced when you apply some type of a force to a transition change in a medium. And in this case, he's talking about magnetic tornadoes. But really what that is he's talking about some type of a circular energy field,
yes,
like a vortex, if you will. And in this case, he's talking about magnetism that's induced when you talk about this, whatever's inducing this reaction and causing this magnetic tornado. I think what he's talking about really is an eddy current.
Nanowires in a manner that reproduces the behavior of logic gates. So, thanks to swirling nanoscale tornadoes of magnetism, which can be flowed through complex networks of nanowires in a manner that reproduces the behavior of logic gates. So if a well rotates clockwise, it represents a 1, and counterclockwise means 0.
There it is right there. There it is. But he's going to say...
Think about the speed with which you would have to change the polarity or polarization of a magnetic field to be able to get a 0 and a 1.
It's at light speed.
It would have to be as close to instantaneous or faster if you want to try to apply this to a quantum scale. This type of stuff would have to happen in an entangled state or at the end of a standing scalar type connection in order for faster than instant connectivity. But if you could achieve that and then do something like this in the body, you can start linking all kinds of interesting biological functions across the internet.
Well, he's going to say one more very, very, very important little thing here, which absolutely ties into some of the quantum effects. And then we're going to go to the next one.
But more importantly, the vortices are non-volatile, and they retain their winding without any power. This type of nanomagnetic chip would use very little energy. And it does give it a possibility that this type of technology...
Did you get it? So once you set one of these atoms and the spin associated with its electrons into its state, they keep going in that direction. Now, he's actually got his diagram. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's actually got the diagram wrong because the arrows on this one would be going the other way. All right. But the point being that there are state, we have, all of the molecules, all the atoms in our bodies, they have these rotational states and they persist even without the addition of an input of power. So that was the whole reason, because this opens up the huge world of the interconnectedness of quantum entangled particles, and that the spin states can persist even without input of energy. You
see the thing on the lower left corner there. It says there's actually four different domains, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah.
And they're only showing 2, but what they're talking about is there's really 4. It's 4 poles, if you will. There's just 4 points that are known. So what they're getting at is you're looking at 4 different positional states at any given time that could represent some type of superconductivity where they're any state and all state or no
Yep.
state all at the same time until they're actually measured.
Yep.
And then that energy efficiency thing they're talking about, there's a lot of things that happen when you get down into the smaller scales like this, but something I read about recently was something called quantum tunneling. And really what it does is just take a piece of the energy of the vibration, if you will, or whatever, the pressure, the change in pressure, and it moves that through whatever the barrier is, the membrane, if you will, and then whatever comes through is measured, and it's called quantum tunneling. But you can use very, very low energies and do this kind of stuff. And where I first saw it was looking at a partnership between AT&T and MIT, and they're looking at cybernetics. Like AT&T's laboratory gets into all kinds of cybernetic research, and they partner with MIT, and they're looking at quantum tunneling effects with nanotransistors to place around the edges of synapses in order to measure and stimulate using quantum tunneling effects at the nanoscale to basically draw out the energy from the brain and stimulate with that level of energy into the brain. And the nervous system for that matter. If we get that far in tonight's show, I'll show you some programs that DARPA is into that discuss mapping and digitizing the nervous system in the brain and the neural circuits and all the functions of that. And when you put these concepts together, what you really get is a hybridized environment that makes a biological organism cybernetic from the inside out.
Yep.
Anyway,
you see the little diagram that I have up there right now. I just want to say quantum mechanics is really not going to be that hard for anybody to figure out. If you have no concept of it right now, it's going to become easier to understand. In actuality, it's elegantly simple. And anyway, we're going to go right to the next video here. All right. Okay, building a computer like your brain. Hey.
The human brain is the most powerful supercomputer in the world.
All right, let's see this electrical headquarters of yours in operation.
It helps us navigate our environment.
He's going to go through some numbers here, and the power of the human brain is really mind-boggling. I don't need to play that much of this one. It's just more foundational stuff. When we combine some of the engineering and techniques that are being perfected with getting that to interface somehow with a human brain, the potential is, I can't even figure out how far that could go. But look at the numbers of computing power in a brain.
And by carrying out about 1,000 trillion logical operations per second. It's compact, uses less power than a light bulb, and has potentially endless storage.
1,000 trillion computations in a second. 1,000 trillion. That's a big number.
The human brain is really one of the most complex systems that we can imagine.
We have a fundamental lack in our understanding of the way the components in the brain interact.
So, 86, what did he say? 86 billion neurons, correct? Imagine, did you even know this? We've done a lot of diagrammatic presentation of firing neurons and controlling them. But did you know, TMC, I didn't know this, that you can have that many connections per neuron?
You know what occurred to me? The answer is no. To answer your question, no. It's an amazing number. What occurred to me when you were saying all that was how many transistors and simultaneous processing functions can coexist on a modern processor in an iPhone with the new M1 chip, for example.
Well, multiple millions.
Right.
Multiple millions.
Right. So what I'm getting at is you can end up setting up dynamic point-to-point, multi-point to point, or dynamic, right, configurations between those 10,000 neural circuits and something like a processor on your phone. I'm just saying.
Yep.
With the local fields, and there are patents out there that talk about the medical applications of the use between 1 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz for remote medical diagnostics and possible therapies and communication and all of that, because those frequencies happen to resonate specifically with the brain. But go ahead.
But think of this. I mean, our most advanced AMD or Intel processors, all right? Okay, granted, millions of transistor junctions on them, many, many millions. But we're talking about 86 billion neurons, 86 billion little individual processing gates connected by as many as 10,000 connections per neuron. And probably a lot of them don't have that many. But I mean, even if a neuron only has 500 connections and you've got 86 billion of them, the power of this thing and the utility of using brains or to grow brain-like structures in a lab and then load them with software to run would be such an efficient computer. It wouldn't generate a whole lot of heat, uses as much electricity as a light bulb, and it's so far, far and beyond anything Intel has come out with. Light years, literally. So
the brain uses about 12 watts, and and so the lady that works, that's the ambassador between AT&T and MIT, she actually gives a talk and talks about the brain and it being 12 watts, and it's equivalent to, and I'm not sure about the number, but I want to say somewhere around like 1 million computers, 1 million laptops. And when you start quantifying out the power consumption of 1 million laptops, and then a brain only being 12 watts and able to do that type of processing and computation, it's no wonder why there is this effort to access every single brain on the planet.
Absolutely. That's why, guys, there is work and money being poured into this field on all fronts, from institutions to industry to defense to communications company to AT&T to Google. Everybody is dumping money into this field. Why? This is why.
And the brain interact, but it is this very interaction that generates cognition and consciousness.
All these mind-boggling intricacies have driven our fascination with the brain, and for centuries we've been trying to map and understand it, and most recently, replicate it.
The brain is certainly a computer that has been evolving for nearly 4 billion years, and the more we learn about the brain, the more we're able to incorporate the smart ways that it does computation into our artificial devices.
Scientists are beginning to agree that to realize our technological dreams, we need to build computers that work like our brains. One day, these computers could in turn help us unlock more secrets of cognition.
And we could cut it there. It's all very interesting. I have a feeling we're going to, use up all our time pretty fast. So rather than you guys can watch this thing at your heart's content. It is amazing stuff. So what does this mean? It means going forward, tying in together that little quantum piece and that retained magnetic spin of particles, and knowing that enters into the quantum world, and knowing that we've got on average 86 billion neurons inside of each one of our minds, and the number of connections that they can have. Can you conceive for just a minute what the potential for our higher levels of consciousness could be, and probably are? But we need to cultivate it. When you need to go and look at that.
I can attempt to quantify it for you, although it's in my opinion at this point unquantifiable. But what it is, it's a multicast that is really like a simulcast that is all overlapped and interlaid into one. And so the future consciousness is going to be many, many, many points of consciousness that use you or your brain or your body as an entire unit as an interface or a prism to take multi-points of consciousness and fuse it together, and it's going to be expressed through however you perceive it. You are the measuring device in this field point space, if you will. If we can hold on. If we can calm ourselves enough to understand and recognize multi-point simultaneous consciousness, and have it function efficiently, the ability for the species to transform itself technologically and solve all of the problems, which in my view likely are already solved, but let's for all intents and purposes keep it simple and like shoot for going off planet. That's really achievable in 20 or 40 years if we can get to a point where multi-stream consciousness replaces text messages with your thumbs with 5 people at the same time. Think about the bandwidth change.
Huge. If we're searching for explanations why some people seem to have the ability for precognition, or they seem to have an extra sense, and we wonder why or how that can happen, is just that mind-boggling number. 86 billion neurons, 10,000 connections. Do the math. You could be connected at a quantum level to literally any time, any place, anything in this universe. That is, in my opinion, a plausible explanation for why some people seem to demonstrate beyond normal perceptive capacities.
They've done studies. They've done studies, and they've shown when they hook people up to other people, like with an EEG machine, like what you see on the Science Channel, right? The disclosed stuff, what they publicly disclose. When they hook people up, any more than 3, and you start getting schizophrenic information transfer, and it translates as schizophrenic type behavior when you look at it in data sets. So it doesn't necessarily translate that as behavior, although I think if you were to overdrive that in a clinical environment and maybe add 4 and then put multiples on top of that. So think about like a derivative kind of an environment where you have multiple stimuli feeding a single stimuli that is one of 4 or more going into a brain. You could probably overdrive a brain and make them do some really crazy shit. But anyway, in the study, what they were talking about was any more than 3 brains working collectively on a problem at the same time. Any more than 3 reduce the efficiency of problem solving is the most objective way to state that.
Yep. How did bees get to be so smart? How did ants get to be so smart as to have a whole cooperative community and be able to know what they're doing and coordinate themselves? They don't have really big brains. So even with something that small, if we're talking about, you just scale down from what we have in, in our minds down to something smaller. But is it any wonder that these communities of creatures can seem to be so intelligent and so well coordinated?
You can put bees really far away from the queen and they all talk. And so when you think about like a bee transmitting like a cell phone, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so there's a lot going on with hive mentality and the idea of trying to replicate something like a hive mentality in a bee colony in a human population. That's a very, very important thing to consider.
Yep. So what you've been looking at here is building a computer like your brain. And what the little graphics that I've been putting up while we've been talking, there's one of them. Let me see if I can find it here. Anyway, it was a kind of a matrix of what I am guessing is a whole bunch of silicon computer circuitry. And that is literally so primitive in comparison to a human brain. I don't know where it was, but it's in the video. They had a whole matrix of stuff up there. And this is from Explaining Computers. And fine work by Mr. Explaining Computers, and he's just going to talk a little bit, this also is not very long, about organic computing. And you guys have been following along with us in the development of these shows and explorations, and we've talked about utilizing biomolecules before. We've talked about the amount of encoded information that can be in DNA. That's a whole nother world from the scope that we were just talking about, which is the computing capacity of a brain. Once again, storage capacity of using DNA molecules in place of a solid state hard drive, for example, would be utterly huge. And then we'll get into some more stuff.
Wait. Before you go any further, that what you just said is profound when you link together this.
The two.
When you link together what you said as a whole and link together the crypto of WO 2020 06 06 06, that patent, that cryptocurrency patent using body activity.
Yes. Because
now all of a sudden you take a million computers, sub it down to a 12-watt brain, and now you put a meat suit on top of that can actually output work. And then you link that into the crypto system, and then you leverage human labor against geothermal in Venezuela and you disrupt markets very, very quickly doing things like that. So we have to be very careful about moving forward with a crypto-based environment.
An area that I've hoped that we'll get into at some point is the interplay between modern personal finance management, cryptocurrency, and the ability to integrate some aspect of these technologies into your ability to have your own completely secure, totally encrypted system of value, whereby I don't know, how can I say it? It's instantaneous, it's on board, it's with you, it's literally unhackable because your mind literally holds the keys to your own encryption.
Anything your brain does produces a signature. So the question then becomes, how sensitive are the sensors? And if the sensors are sensitive enough to sense what's going on at that level of detail, then it doesn't matter what you're doing inside your body. It's not secure. In fact, it's wide open. There is no firewall to the brain, folks. There's no firewall to the nervous system. None. Zero. Except hard work and discipline. That is the only firewall.
That would be a very interesting part of getting into that conversation about the interplay between technology, biotechnology, and once again, personal security, personal finance, personal privacy, all that stuff. Well, let's hit this thing really, really briefly. And here he goes.
Some people talk about DNA computing, although DNA computing is really a subset of what I'll be discussing here. Now, I need to stress from the outset that organic computing is at best today highly experimental, and some of it is entirely theoretical. But we do know with absolute certainty that organic computing can work. For a start, I'm using an organic computer right now to make this video, and you're all watching it using an organic brain. There are three basic ways in which organic computers may potentially be created. The first is to build a system in which some of the components are natural or artificial living materials. The second is then to utilize DNA as a medium for information storage or information processing. And finally, we could potentially design a new computational entity, artificially fabricate its entire genome, and bioprint or grow a functional biocomputer.
So if you remember, last week's episode, we showed a number of pictures of different types of organic molecules that are exact replicas of the switching and processing components in a computer.
Now, it may surprise you to learn that some of these things have already been achieved. For example, in 1999, Professor William Ditto built a working organic computer using neurons obtained from a leech. So what he did is he took the leech, he somehow took out the neurons very carefully, I'm sure, and he took some tiny little electrodes, put them into these neurons, wired it all together, and ended up with a working computer, a device that could add or subtract two numbers, and which became
22 years ago
known as the leechulator. Now, at the time, Professor Ditto's ideas, he was working at the Georgia Institute of Technology, his ideas were to build a biocomputer, a brain for a robot, because he had this idea that robots would need very sophisticated brains, and he saw that supercomputers were very large and they were far too big to mount on a robot back in 1999. So he thought maybe the solution would be to build biological brains, as he put it, for robots.
Very futuristic, visionary thinker he was, wasn't he, Mr. Ditto? Interesting name, Mr. Ditto. Dr. Ditto, Professor Ditto. I'm not quite sure what his title would be. I'd be curious to look him up and see what he's doing now and where he's working.
Now, of course, since 1999, traditional computers, inorganic computers, have shrunk enormously. We've now also got cloud robotics, so robots can have their processing power remote out in the cloud. and therefore Professor Ditto has moved on to other work. But his initial experiment, building this neuron-based computer using neurons from a leech, is still a milestone in organic computing.
It pretty well covers it. Do you want to dive into anything at this point?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Sounds good.
Okay.
The journey begins.
Yeah. So I'm going to try something here. I posted this spreadsheet to the top of my Twitter, and
while you're getting it ready, https humaninternet.org. Links are in the show notes below, and we'll put pieces of this up there somehow, one way or the other. You'll be able to find the information that we're displaying. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. So going through some architectural changes at this point, it's going to take some time. There's a lot of other things happening.
It's going well, though.
There's progress. So anyway, long story short, this is going to be a working document that is available for you to browse. And as long as the links are active, I recommend you download as much as you can, because some of this stuff isn't anymore, and I've had to find other ways to put it into this space. So what I want to share with you is the commercial and military trajectories for brain-computer interfaces, and at this point, focusing particularly on hardware. And then if we get far enough today, zeroing in on paramagnetic and magnetic nanoparticles, what they can do, and the receptor sites they can manipulate, etc.
Pretty much all from the hardware and structural standpoint today.
Oh, we'll see how far we get, but yeah, I think this is going to be a multi-part series. There's information on this sheet that I haven't even added yet that sort of interlaces in this idea of nested frequency transmissions that occur in the brain, particularly across the hemispheres. And when you start applying those practices and start syncing brain hemispheres together, now you can start doing some very interesting things with the brain. But that's only one little piece. And anyway, those
you know what I just thought of?
Are not there. Yeah, go ahead.
I just thought of separating the brain hemispheres and using them independently, as well as linking.
That's right. So when we get far enough with the hardware, perhaps that will come more into focus, in that once the hardware apparatus is established in the brain, a number of different things can occur. So this is the commercial, cute, fluffy side of where this is all going. Organizations like Neuralink, OpenWater. If you're not familiar with OpenWater, look up openwater.io, I believe. And it's Mary Lou Jepson, and she is MIT PhD in holography, went to work for Google and Facebook, went over to Asia and worked a lot there, and knows a great deal about holography and the chipset industry for mobile devices. And she's building devices that will image the body 1,000,000 times better than an MRI, with something that one day you're going to be able to buy at Rite Aid and link it to your phone. And it's going to use infrared light and ultrasound, and it's going to be able to image anything that you wrap this thing around, ace bandage, ski cap. And on the topic of a ski cap, the other function that is possible is complete and total brain-computer interface, where you have 100% connectivity to somebody's brain with a device. And she has patents for these things, and we'll go over those at some point. Anyway, that's OpenWater. Amazing technology, especially when you start looking at holography and what holography can do with respect to mapping and creating like holograms of different centers of the brain and mapping neural circuits in real time and generating holograms of that, right? And then what you can do with plasmas. And what I mean by that is when you start focusing light, particularly in this case, infrared light, because we're talking about maybe doing this in the brain, when you start generating plasmas by concentrating and focusing laser beams into the brain with something that, is the same thing as the ski cap, then you can start writing to the brain and doing some other interesting things in the brain, like modifying genomic structures and protein formations and triggering, epigenetic responses and enzymatic reactions and neurochemical synaptic control and all of that with a device like this. And your iPhone has the chipset stuff in it. It's just oriented differently. It's further away from the body. So at that point, how sophisticated is the software? And then how do you transduce ultrasound? And the way to transduce ultrasound is with electromagnetic radiation as it transmits through the body. So you have an infrared source that's got a laser array on it that can multiply itself by many, many orders of magnitude that is shining at your face and your neck while you're staring at your phone with electromagnetic radiation all around that can be pinpointed, focused, and converged in ways that generate ultrasound that do exactly what her technology does, only it's no contact. So there's open waters technology in a nutshell, commercial and military. Neuralink is advertising like 1970s, 1980s technology with wiring up to the brain. And that's just to really, I think, acclimate the public with this idea of hooking up your brain to the internet. And the DARPA N3 program is where we're going to go a little bit later on. So I highlighted a lot of this for you to illustrate kind of where we're going in the commercial space, as well as, where we're going to go in the military space. So here's the real crazy, weird robot that was ultimately needed to do something like this. A brain is jiggly and moves and pulses while heart beats. So you need a robot that can map all of that so you don't rupture blood vessels when you're poking needles and wires into the brain, which is really 1970s technology with the sleek, sexy form factor. But the real bread and butter of this technology is this damn robot. Because this robot right here, the applications, the software, and everything that's associated with doing this to human level standards, FDA cleared standards, the applications with this in the field of medicine and everything is going to be amazing. So there's a lot of positive aspects with developing 1970s technology. So moving on to
I know. Look at the dates. Look at the dates and then look at now and just imagine. Definitely allow your sci-fi mind to extrapolate to the future that might actually be now.
Yeah. So the open water, they don't have a good graphic in here, and we'll spend some time looking at light at some point in the future. But I really want to spend time showing you the focus of DARPA and where DARPA has been, because this is where DARPA is now as it relates to their PR, their public relations. Their public relations at this point are looking at inserting bidirectional neural interfaces at the nanoscale, whether they're inserted with synthetic material that's doped with genetic material that's temporary, meaning semi-permanent, right? Or whether it's growing materials in the body to ultimately become permanent structures that potentially pass on to your offspring, where brain-computer interfaces just kind of happen when you get pregnant. And then, you got a brain-computer interface hooked up to your baby before you even know you're pregnant. DARPA does. So let me show you a little bit about where they're at least with, kind of how they're publicly disclosing, mainlining this into your veins, because that's really one of the ways this is going to happen. So what they're showing you here is this idea of using directed energy in one form or another. In a military setting, it's going to be like a Kevlar helmet or a flight helmet with ultrasounds, transducers, magnetic fields, and potentially light. And there are pads that are strategically oriented around it. And what you ultimately get are known points of trajectory that will enable triangulation in the brain. And what I mean by a triangulation in the brain is something like this.
Precise positional location.
Yeah. I found these, and they're really good visual diagrams for exactly what we're talking about here. And what this points to is, imagine all of these points being points on a helmet. And in this case, it's a complete circle, but you get the idea, right? All of the points talk or connect with every other point. And so you can get points of convergence that allow for pinpoint accuracy in something like a brain, when you are dealing with overlapping and interfering ultrasound waves, magnetic field, or magnetic waves, or light. And what's really interesting is this program here, Moana, which we'll look at again because we highlighted it last week, is this idea of using viruses to deliver genetic information. And there are viruses that pass into the blood-brain barrier. There's a reason why when you get the cold and the flu, your head feels like shit. Adenoviruses and lentiviruses, which are also in this document, optogenetics have used brain-specific viruses to deliver optogenetic code for a long, long time in quote-unquote research. So don't let this writing here deceive you. What they're talking about here is being able to use focused ultrasound or focused magnetic fields to do things like open up the blood-brain barrier to selective sites in the brain, right? That will allow these genetic protein cocktails, if you will, to only access certain points of the brain. And
Right.
when you do that, ultimately, you start putting these points, rather than being in a Kevlar helmet, these points then become points inside the brain. And you no longer need a Kevlar helmet. You can use wireless interface devices that don't necessarily have to be attached to the head anymore because your interface points are directly in the brain. So anyway, what they're talking about here is to transfer images from brain to brain, right? So communicating with imagery and or, real telepathy. Not too far away from VR. So what they're talking about is being able to ultimately generate active, engaging, controlled hallucinations that are the new way humans communicate. Full, complete, sensory, emotional sensations as the new form of communication through direct neural interface that takes the place of your thumbs and your eyes only looking at your screen on your phone. That is where this technology is going. Matrix, fully immersive, virtual reality. So the US military is developing wireless tech to control weapons with the mind. And this is another article that talks about this DARPA N3 program. And what's interesting here is that they showed right here, scientists can reconstruct people's vision into digital video. Oh, in the early 2010s, scientists were able to take and measure what's going on in somebody's brain and reconstruct it into a digital video. Imagine what sitting down in the bunker in the bottom of the White House looks like when you're witnessing a raid through Spec Ops eyeballs, and it's high definition, high resolution as the Spec Ops guy sees it while you're sitting in the bunker.
Yep.
After you've given the go order. So the N3 project will realize this because, of course, this isn't really real yet. So here's kind of what they're looking at, right? External devices and internal devices. The external devices consist of directed energy systems, ultrasound, light, radio frequency, and magnetic fields. Stimulators and sensors, they all do the same thing. You have an ultrasound stimulator and an ultrasound sensor. What is that? An ultrasound stimulator on your phone. Ultrasound stimulator is a speaker. An ultrasound sensor is a microphone.
That's an acoustic transducer.
That's right. Well, what I'm saying is that exists in a mobile device. An ultrasound directed energy system potentially exists in a phone or a multitude of mobile devices. If you had ultrasound emitters in like 4 phones average in a family, plus a tablet or 2, maybe a laptop or 2, and then your television and anything else that might have a speaker on it that gives you a ding or a buzz or a notifier, right? All of those things potentially emit ultrasound that when you learn about Eugene beamforming, you'll be able to put the pieces together whereby a single central computer, something like a new phone, for example, would take command and control over your home network, and everything that's mapped and is connected would be able to have a single main point of direction, being that phone. And that phone could then potentially be commandeered, or one of the devices become the main device, hacked, let's say by a country like China, right? Commandeers everything else on your home network and then starts emitting ultrasonic pings. But it gets better. Your home has been mapped. There's radar applications and ultrasonic applications. Again, when you look at beamforming and when you look at Eugene beamforming, you're able to take and understand directionality, and you're also able to take and understand intensity and directionality. And so if you're able to do that with Eugene beamforming and map the environment, you could then theoretically, with all of the devices in your home, start emitting ultrasonic pings, knowing how they bounce off walls, how they absorb, how they change, because you have these all stimulators and sensors on board all of your devices, the microphone and the speaker, and they can set up everything very, very quickly. And all of a sudden start pinging and introduce concentrated ultrasound, if you will. I'm just hypothesizing here. The same is true with electromagnetic fields.
To modify the state once a target is identified.
Yeah.
Right.
So imagine the system's being sophisticated enough that it can do this while tracking you real time walking around your house. And we'll move on, because these ideas and concepts apply to light, radio frequency, and magnetic fields. These concepts apply.
Just background information. And of course, these episodes are for your entertainment only. Now, do we have a lot to worry about with this stuff? Well, in one sense, we really don't, because you consider the immense power of a human mind. This stuff, everything that we're talking about, is so completely primitive when you stack that up against one human brain. But
I got to disagree with you. I got to disagree with you. This stuff is incredibly sophisticated.
I knew you would, but let me finish my point first.
Yeah, go.
The kicker is we owe it to ourselves to explore and discover those higher levels of human consciousness. And you can call that spirituality, you can call it ESP, you can call it extra dimensional, you can call it intuition, you can call it whatever you want. We need to explore those things in order to ensure our future sovereign survivability going forward. We must, and we have it. The good news is we have those capacities. I'm done.
All right, good. So here's where it gets a little creepy. The injectable, ingestible, and intranasal. Listen to this. Injectable, ingestible, eat it or drink it, right? Intranasal, inhale it or absorb it through a mucous membrane. This also means potentially through your skin. And we'll look, if we get far enough today, we'll look at some applications of magnetic nanoparticles being delivered through the same type of stuff you find in ingredient lists in the cosmetics at Rite Aid or Walgreens or whatever your local pharmacy is, right? It's the same stuff. So, but that's maybe for another day. But nanotechnology, right? Membrane modifications and molecular assembly. Listen to this. This is the N3 program dealing with genetic information, genetic manipulation, fusing it with silicon, fusing it with synthetic nanotech that we understand today is like really, really small stuff that's not alive, right? So it's this molecular assembly. And where we're getting is this idea of reading and writing without a need to wear a hat. And that's where we are in the world today, folks. And these programs are in their second phases officially. They just recently transitioned into their second phases. There's 3 phases in this N3 program. But if they're publicizing this program, folks, the reason why they're publicizing this program is because what is going to be developed through the funding and the focused intensity with these technologies is not to innovate or manifest this complete neural interface. What is really going to manifest out of this is advances in material sciences and software development that allow for the deployment of what's already been developed on a broad scale. That's what's really happening, in my view, with this N3 program, because what they're focused on is something they already know, I think, right? Most of what they already know what they're going to get. So the way that it's presented, again, the PR piece, why the public gets this unclassified piece of some DARPA program, right? If this is what the public is seeing, how many layers behind this? right?
Mm-hmm.
How many layers behind this? And so this is the public program that says, hey, come to the table. Let's go to this other room and have a different conversation. That's what this program is. And the public is to see, oh, look, this is what's coming on the horizon. Welcome. Wake up. It's today. Today is your lucky day.
Good stuff. Good
Document.
stuff.
This is from the IEEE back in 2018. So we're now 3 years later, basically.
Yep.
DARPA N3 program. And the stuff is in the spreadsheet. So again, I encourage you, go to Human Internet One, it's pinned to the top, and pull this spreadsheet and read this stuff for yourself. And it starts talking about replacing ECOG arrays, people that have the square thing that's screwed into the top of their head and they can move a robotic arm or feed themselves or type with a computer, right? All that stuff. They say, look at the innovations of DARPA. Yeah, it's bullshit. Bullshit. This is what DARPA is telling you they're innovating. And this, in my view, is like 30 years behind where they're really, really at, which is why when I explained to you open water, right? And I have great love for Mary Lou Jepson's brain. That lady is brilliant, brilliant lady. I have no idea how she conducts herself on her own time, but her contribution, if you will, to the advancement of technology for the species is great. Outside of, I don't know her personally, right? But brilliant. Amazing. Yeah,
brilliant lady.
Right. And so what we can learn from her technologies really is what I think is being developed, deployed, in use. How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go for your entertainment purposes only, right? We can learn a lot of the science and the physics and all of that, right? And start conceiving what's possible from a no contact environment. Think about the tools that would be used by the CIA, for example, projecting power outward to other countries. Think about the tools other countries are trying to use on us. Why did we ban Huawei? Why did we do that? We did it because we have directed energy systems that are deployed everywhere in multiple, what's the right word? There are multiple devices in anyone's home today. Multiple devices. And this is not including the Wi-Fi routers that you have no control over. And if the Wi-Fi routers are broadcasting, guess what? All those other devices are likely broadcasting waves too in other people's houses, apartments around you, houses around you, whatever, right?
And interesting thing, just on that subject, it's a little digression, but it's connected. We don't know. We are not privy to what pieces of software are in all those devices which enable them to network together invisibly to us. You don't actually know what other devices your router is talking to or your cell phone is talking to. Yeah, you can pull up the user screen and it'll give you a list of, who's on it, but you don't really know
what you're hitting on.
Type of.
You're hitting on something critical, and it's really this. The big tech apparatus doesn't stop with the edge providers or the end providers. It doesn't stop there.
Right.
It's the telecoms, man. It's the telecom. They are just as much involved in this. They're just as much involved in this because they're the ones that manage and understand traffic flow. They understand everything that's going on with your router. When you get a router handed to you from a cable company or a phone company or a satellite company, whatever, set-top box for satellite, they know everything that talks to it. They know everything. They do,
but we don't.
Soak it all up.
That's my point. They do, but we don't.
Right. And so when we start looking at holding people accountable and asking questions and where and why and how do we fix this problem? How do we deploy cybersecurity mechanisms? And where does the military and the NSA and the protection mechanisms of local government, when we start deploying quantum-based systems, where should we recommend they deploy their focused energy? When we start deploying quantum-based systems at a local level, at a county level or a state level, where is it going to be? And in my view, it's this. Let's start looking at our neighborhoods and seeing and trying to identify software that's out there that's modulating the brains and the nervous system of our population. Why? Because it's freaking illegal. It's against the Constitution. And quite frankly, if companies are allowing that, Facebook, Google, Twitter, Microsoft, Amazon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, Verizon, who gives a shit? They're guilty of treason because all of them likely working with the government. and which is why they're doing and why the keys have been handed to them in the first place, to be able to read and understand what's going on with your router, why you have to sign, why has the click this here and sign our what's the term I'm looking for? It's not non-disclosure, it's terms of service. Sign our terms of service so that you can use our service. Yep. Why haven't they sued and fixed all of that? And the reason is this: it opens the door for public-private partnership to rape the information out of your household. And we're getting to the point where they're going to put information into your household, into your children.
Already pretty much being done.
Just for their entertainment. And it's just for their entertainment purposes only.
I had a thought which slightly escapes me, but I think I can recover a little bit of it. If you don't, this is what it sort of was. Anything that you does not need to, that are not required to disclose to you, will not be disclosed to you. All right. If they don't have to tell you, if there isn't some law that says you have to show every single bit of functionality of these devices, you have to have the end user has to at any point in time be able to see a complete map of all of the connectedness and all of the functionality that's going on. If there isn't a specific law that says that, or for that matter, all of the data acquisition that we're doing and exactly what it is and how detailed it is, if there isn't a law, then you won't be told, and they don't have to. But and it's at your option. When you sign that agreement, you click off that box. Well, okay, I clicked it because you want to get that device, whatever function it is that it does, whether it's a phone or a set-top box, whatever, you just want it. So there's a real problem there. All right. And we need to be a little bit more discriminating. We need to be a little bit more specific about things. And we got a little ways to go with that.
Totally agree. So are we ready to move?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So here's the N3 Proposers Day, and we're going to breeze through this and keep going. So this is an idea of this is the Infancy Proposers Day. Here, come see what we're trying. Here's what we're conceptualizing. Oh, look, I'll just sit here and work on my computer and with my helmet or my cap on, and I'll have my brain modulated so that I can do my job better at, work. Great. So we've looked at this diagram quite a bit. Stimulator and sensor with nanotech. And down here, you've got sodium and calcium. And what they're getting at here is being able to stimulate ion channels, which has to do with controlling neural function, whether it be your heart or your muscles or your lungs or your brain or whatever, man. So here's how this really breaks down, right? They want to ultimately connect the brain to a computer, right? Develop algorithms, decode neural ensembles, etc. Well, this has been ongoing for a long, long time. People have had brain stimulators in for 30, 40, 50 years or more. So what they're really trying to do is modernize and upgrade this idea of making these ensembles, these decoded neural ensembles. They want to put them into nice, cute little kits or nice, cute little packages where they're modular. So think of it like an M4 platform.
What's their goal with this?
Where the human is the chassis. And then you've got little modular pieces of neural ensemble code that you can apply to the human organism to have them ultimately express whatever it is you want them to express. What is the goal? The goal ultimately, man, is to access the 12-watt computer that replaces 1 million laptops.
Yep.
To be frank with you about it. And beyond that, you can get really far out there and start trying to understand what multidimensional communication might look like from, another timeline or another species or another version of us, or, you can get all crazy with the whimsical what the hell over the stuff that is really cutting edge that these futurist people are into and have like cooperative, research facilities with the military. There's a lot of stuff that Facebook and Google and Twitter, all these people are into a lot of some really interesting stuff that never gets talked about, that stays behind closed doors. And it has to do with the 1995 Technology Transfer Act that was enacted. And that was during the Clinton administration. And really what that did was open the door for public-private partnership to start sharing government technologies with industry to share the costs of innovation. And what that really did in 1995 was open the door to dispersing really, really secret shit from the government out to corporations, to then have the corporations be infiltrated by other countries, to then siphon off intellectual property over a very, very, very long period of time and extract a lot of money for everybody involved. And that's where you get your special access programs, folks.
Yep.
So here's some of the real cool stuff about this. 1 millimeter or less cubed for a single point. They want less than 10 millisecond resolution, so faster than your neurons can reset themselves, way faster. They want continuous operation for greater than or equal to 2 hours because, labor union breaks are going away in the new workforce of tomorrow after the Great Reset. No more 2 hours and take a break. I'm kidding, by the way. What this really looks at is how do we operate a meat suit for more than 2 hours autonomously? If we have to have a power stack attached to a soldier with standalone computational systems or quantum encrypted systems that function through, modern 5G networks in another country that you're just going to ghost in on and tap into their local nets or uplink to a SAT, whatever the hell you're doing, you need a standalone system. Minimum requirements are 2 hours on an operator. That's what they're looking for with that. Accuracy to read and write to the brain, to enhance neural functioning, to enhance motor skills, etc. for greater increased mission success is better than or equal to 95%. So better than or equal to 95%, I'm going to punch this guy in the face. You're going to punch this guy in the face. And you're going to do it with expert precision and lock the cartilage of the nose up into the back or the front of the brain, because it will be done expertly, because AI will have talked to your brain with greater than or equal to 95% accuracy to put your arm on the correct trajectory at the right distance from the person, right? To land the perfectly executed palm heel strike to the face. Safety, less than or 1% degree rise in Celsius. Now, this is really interesting when you start looking at FCC requirements for SAR, right? Specific absorption rate, the amount of electromagnetic energy that is allowable into a human organism, right, over a period of time that is determined to be safe or unsafe. And less than or equal to a 1 degree centigrade rise in tissue pretty much ensures that whatever stimulation you're doing will not destroy any tissue. The tissue will remain intact. So any changes to the tissue, theoretically, they will go back to normal. I have my doubts about that, because if you overdrive the ion channels, my belief is, and this is just basic anything, think about putting a turbo and NOS on a car, right? You got a brand new engine in a badass Japanese car, and you're going to put NOS and a turbocharger on this thing. The engine's done in 40,000 miles. It's done. Right. In 40,000 miles. So when you start thinking about, we're not going to disrupt tissue to the point where we're going to cook it, right? We'll go back to normal. Okay, well, if they're really going to overdrive you, right, to the point where you're going to ensure mission success, think about this, man. Think about 2 super soldiers going at it in hand-to-hand combat, and you got AI systems with greater than 95% accuracy stimulating their brains, trying to choke each other out and kill each other. How much overdriving of the neural systems is going to occur to ensure your guy wins?
Yep.
So,
but the soldier is rather expendable in that situation. It's just, acquire.
Not when you've plugged $4 or $5 million in them, dude. You kind of want to get them back, especially if they've gone, behind enemy lines to grab some really important information. You want them back. And so from a tactical decision at that point, if you're going to overdrive the brain and you're putting yourself in that position, how many times can that happen before you're going to be like, okay, what does the VA offer me for long-term disability? Am I going to get some type of augmented AI assistance for the rest of my life because you burned out my neural systems for 10 years doing some badass shit for the country? I'm just saying, because this is where it's going for soldiers.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah, they want multifocal capability. And this is really where it gets interesting, because they want 16 sites in the brain. And when you sub that down, they want 4 read and write locations without crosstalk, which means that 4 of the 16 centers in the brain is going to be associated with the minimum requirement right here. greater than or equal to 4 reading and writing locations. And so what this really opens the door to is creating some really interesting electric fields in the brain. If you have 4 different places in the brain that you can induce current, and you can get those currents to start interacting with each other, you can now create directionality and focality in the brain and start stimulating deep tissue, deep brain stimulation with multi-frequency stimulations.
And bring that
nested,
right to practicality.
Multi-frequency nested neural stimulations. And this is a minimum of 4, right?
Bring that right to practicality. Deep brain stimulation. What do we mean by that? Being able to substitute, alter, or add other thoughts, add other behaviors, add other skills.
Yeah. You could say deep brain stimulation, if you were to look this up in a clinical sense, as objectively as possible, deep brain stimulation fixes things like uncontrollable epilepsy, and it works on Alzheimer's, it works on depression, it overrides crazy systems in the brain. It can make you incredibly, I mean, people burn out, they burn out their deep brain stimulators giving themselves orgasms. Right. So like a deep brain stimulator, the old way is like they drill a hole and they put a long rod in your brain, and like they can put electric voltages on it, and it creates a sensation in the pleasure center of the brain, and people will burn out what should be like a 5 or a 10-year brain stem. They'll burn it out in like a year.
If it's a soldier in that environment, most soldiers know that there is some potential peril to themselves, and that in any particular situation that comes up, they might have to be expendable for the sake of the overall success.
Yeah, well, I think it should be. I think there should be some real clear understanding as it relates to what type of asset you're signing up to be. Are you signing up to be a disposable asset, or are you signing up to be an asset for life? And what I mean by that is this: if you make it through whatever it is you're doing, clandestine or otherwise, through the field work, and now you're done, you have an opportunity to really apply what you've learned. You have value in your brain. Now think about these technologies, and if the VA did provide augmented assistance, how much support could you provide a new guy? How much support could you provide anybody without your skill sets in a pinch? If you could be called upon at any given time by your country to support with extra focus and extra consideration, to support somebody who's actually young and able-bodied enough to go out and do something crazy for your country, would you do that? And the answer is hell yeah, you would, because you've already done it for 10 years and your meat suit's broken or it's aged or whatever. But if your brain's still good, why not? And this is the future of tomorrow, being able to rapidly accelerate training. Think about taking a SEAL or Spec Ops of any type out of their basic concentrated training with this type of tech, and then linking them up with 2 or 3 vets who are retired that just sit there and mentor them. They sit there and they drill them and they train them, and they literally beat the mental shit out of them and make them grizzly tough and train them up. And through that process, their brains are now linked. And so when that new guy goes into combat, he's got 3 or 4 extra sensory perception, tactical decision makers, all of it at his disposal right now. And this is the future of warfighting, where you can have a 70-year-old man, you can have a 70-year-old man piloting a fleet of drones, albeit they're mosquito drones or gnats, to go in and deliver very specific genetic payloads to somebody to kill them, and only them. And because an individual might happen to have to be a licensed doctor, maybe he's got to be online to witness that, so that it's all on the up and up for the record books. I'm just saying, when we're talking about connecting people to the internet and then ultimately to drones, does it have to be a play drone, or can it be a couple gnats that deliver just a baby amount of genetic information right into the lip or the eye or the mucous membrane, or perhaps they're even inhaled. Perhaps the gnats are even inhaled by some world leader, and then after the course of 3 months, go left, go right. No, we don't want you to do that anymore. I think we should change the way we're doing things in this country, everybody. I think we should change the way we're doing things in this country. I've had a change of heart and I don't know why, but I feel very strongly about this. We really should start allowing women to go to school and take the burqas off their face. Just saying. So anyway, phase 2, which is where they're at now, here's what they're looking at. Greater than or equal to 16 channels. Like I said earlier, 16 channels, 16 millimeter resolution, nanotransducers. They want to acquire signals and use amplifiers and machine learning, everything your phone can do with signal processing. They're just doing it out of your brain. And I'm going to put stuff together that shows how the very same signal processing and information transmission techniques that are used for wireless and wireline information transfer also work inside your body. And when you start putting these points together, like Cartesian plots and Poincaré maps, and understand fast Fourier transforms, and 16 points of contact in the brain to develop complex three-dimensional electric fields, kind of makes sense. And maybe then QAM, quadrature amplitude modulation, and orthogonal frequency division multiplexing concepts might be very good ones to start applying when you start looking at physical link layer connections to the brain. Never mind transmitting information, just setting up the physical link layer. Do I have a connection? And if I do have a connection, can I send a basic stream of ones and zeros? Not data, just I'm getting a 1 and a 0 and a 1 and a 0. What did you get? I got a 1 and a 0 and a 1 and a 0. Good. We have a link. That. In order to do that, you need complex mathematical systems, and they're done through Fourier transforms, and the modern wireless industry has deployed very, very effective modulation schemes that transmit information very efficiently, and they simultaneously create what would be represented as something like a Poincaré field that, when passed through the body, can create some very interesting effects, like bidirectional neural interfaces with nanotechnology, or genetic information that's grown in your brain and your body. Let's move on. Here's their broad agency announcement. We won't go through it, but it's the whole document for their broad agency announcement. And it's currently available online on this website, and I've downloaded it. So if it goes away, then I'll find another way to put it up. But it really gets into like the underlying components of what this whole program gets into, man. And they talk about the technical areas and in a whole lot of detail, and the different interests in maybe subcomponent technologies and where they want to be in the different phases. And there's a piece in here I think I want to share with you. Nanotransducers. Here we go. We're getting to it. Program metrics. It's critical. So here it is right here. 16 channels per modality. They want subcomponents. They want greater than or equal to 32 independent channels in a 16 millimeter cubed volume with at least 16 channels per modality. We're talking about putting channel systems in your brain, folks. Like complex, the same channel systems they would use to route traffic in a phone system, right? That's like on the corner of an industrial park, and there's a whole bunch of stuff and equipment inside there, and it routes information.
But TMC, it's so primitive compared to what the actual capacities of the human brain really are.
Yeah, that's what's trying to be accessed. Here's the schools, and as we go forward in time, Indy, I think we should spend some time digging on these and seeing where it takes us. And some of these you'll recognize. Patel, we'll look at them.
We should pick the top four, and get into each one of them.
And Rice, 5 actually. And so when you look at this stuff, they kind of overlap. But when you look at this stuff, think of this as only one layer. And what this really talks about here, we can, if you want to go through them, we can. But they want to take electromagnetic nanotransducers and deliver them to neurons of interest. And they're going to take electrical signals out of your brain and turn them into magnetic signals and then measure the magnetic signals. And we're talking about very, very small levels of energy, right? And this is where we go back into the quantum stuff, but that's a whole nother topic. And Carnegie Mellon, right? They want to use acoustic optical conversion technologies, right? So that's photoacoustic, right? Or it's using ultrasound and light simultaneously, which is similar to what Open Water is interested in doing, where they're using interfering electric fields in addition to looks like acoustic and optical to actually read and write to the brain. What's interesting here is why I said was because they can use acoustics and optics to generate electric fields. And maybe that's what they're talking about here, is this idea of using sound and light to generate the interfering electric fields to be able to write to specific neurons. It says here they also want to use ultrasound waves, right, to actually guide light. Did you know that ultrasound can move light around? Did you know that?
I did not.
I didn't either, but this team,
ultrasound can
Carnegie
move.
Mellon, right, is going to use ultrasound waves to guide light into and out of the brain to detect neural activity. Yeah, I
didn't know that. How does that work?
Well, it works at the how do I don't even want to, almost don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it. It works at the nanoscale. Let's just say it that way. And really what's happening there is you.
Oh, I know how it must happen.
Kind of looking at, you're almost looking at
the
spin
ultrasound
states.
Modifies the transmitting capacities of whatever the molecule is that's getting hit by the light. So either it'll transmit it or it won't, because the ultrasound made the molecule non-receptive to that light frequency.
No, you've got half of it, and here's the other half. The ultrasound changes the morphology, if you will, which then shifts the frequency of the light as it's reflected back. So you have a known wavelength in, and then you have a wave shifted frequency of light as a result of the molecule or the neuron being disrupted or roughened, for that matter. Anytime there's a change in the morphology or the shape of the neuron, it changes the wavelength of the light that's reflected off of it, because the characteristics of the reflection have changed.
Yep.
So you get wave shifted light. So instead of it being, you just get one nanometer or 2 nanometer difference. So
I wonder if you can Doppler shift light frequency with another kind of energy.
Completely optical systems for the brain, ultrasound waves with magnetic fields to generate local currents. This is bread and butter right here. This is what I think's been going on for a long, long time. At a very low scale, how do you generate a stable 10 hertz oscillating wave? And then when the cable companies got sophisticated with their set-top boxes and really opened up the channel spectrum, you start doing this stuff inside of everybody's home instead of doing it through the television towers or the Gwen towers, the weather monitoring towers. It's ultrasound waves and magnetic fields, right? So you have magnetic fields, but you also have electromagnetic fields. You have those in your house, and you have those from the radio towers, and I'm talking about back in the day. And so what you ultimately do on a grand scale is create a general 10 hertz oscillation very gently with a combination of things. You use various magnetic fields, but you also use electromagnetic fields, because as they transfer into tissue, move through tissue, they generate ultrasound waves. So anyway, this is like history of like large scale population. You can look this stuff up, man. Like there's writings all over about open experiments the USSR was doing. They were sending 10 hertz signals and other low frequency behavior modifying signals miles and miles and miles away and affecting an entire town. Like they built an entire tower outside of a little town. And I say a little town, it had a lot of people, but it's a little town in Russia, right? They built a tower out there and started experimenting on people. And they learned a lot about what electromagnetics do to people. And you can look all this, it's free online. You can look all this information up online. And anyway, Bryce, we'll look at them. Let's move on. Battelle, bidirectional brain interface. And we've spent time on this document for a while, but this kind of sets the table for the magnetic nanoparticles, which we'll highlight quickly, hopefully this show. If not, we'll get into it next show. In this case, they're injected into the brain, and then they're going to use complex magnetic fields to route it up to the brain, deploy it into the brain, use ultrasound, magnetic fields, light, whatever, to drop off genetic payloads or other bound materials or attached materials to these magnetoelectric nanotransducers to permanently modify or temporarily modify neural structures. In addition to that, these magnetoelectric nanoparticles also provide a read and a write. So the beauty of this technology is not only can it read and write to the brain, it can also be used as a delivery vehicle to drop off genetic modification. Very, very important. Here is the genetic modification piece, which we kind of already highlighted a little bit, but this is Rice University the Moana program. And what the goal is to hook up two brains and have somebody think about or say out loud a house, or I'll restate this. They're thinking about a car. They're visualizing a car in their head. The helmet reads that information, passes it through a computer, and writes it into patient B with the appropriate information for patient B. And here's where this is a critical piece, and this is where big tech comes into play and where the internet at large comes into play. When your brain waves are monitored and it goes through the computer in this diagram, that's the cloud. There is a computer interface in between your communication and anybody else's, and here's why. Your brainwave signature for a car is not the same brainwave signature that somebody else has for a car. It's unique. It is like a fingerprint, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier about trying to hide information. You can't. The brain is the most open, exposed thing there is, and the technology at this point is already deployed to access it. Whether you like it or not, this is the world we live in today, and it's getting more and more complex as the days go by. But what is important to note here is big tech and big telecom, because they are the ones responsible for moving the information once it's out of your brain, right? That's courtesy of the cell phone or the Wi-Fi or whatever, right? Staying away from the satellite architecture, which is a conversation all by itself. Once it's at the cell phone and it needs to be transmitted over the internet, big tech and big telecom have access to this information. So it goes to a cloud-based system. Typically Amazon, if you go look at Amazon cloud contracts for the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security, and others, they house biometric information for everybody. Amazon and or Microsoft, and in my view, probably both behind the scenes because the government's going to want redundancy, has biometric information on everybody in the world that they can get. And the reason why is because they have objectives to be able to understand anybody coming onto a secure facility, to know who they are, where they are, what their current status is, what they are, exactly everything about them within a matter of like 30 seconds, and to do it globally. And in order to do that, you need cloud-based systems that are monolithic, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Microsoft, and on and on and on. The telecoms are a whole different subset.
Did you hear what Roger Waters said to, I think it was Facebook? They wanted to use one of his pieces of music, Roger Waters from Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I told him to, yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So here's where this gets really creepy, right?
Got the right idea, Roger.
Here's where this gets really, really creepy. And I'm not dismissing what you're saying, brother. I understand what you're doing, and I appreciate that, because I'm in.
It's all right.
I'm doing 90 miles an hour, and the reason why is because we're gonna run out of time, and there's 10 more shows like this. So if you can keep up, great. If you can't, watch the reruns until you understand this stuff is so important, so important. So
take us through more.
Important stuff
go
here.
Slow enough so we can absorb it. Take us through more. I think we're going slow. So What we're talking about here is this school, Rice University, wants to deliver genetic payloads that are different. And the difference, or the distinction being the difference between encoding and decoding information. So they can use different genes to express different protein structures that interface with directed energy systems, light, sound, or electromagnetics. Protein structures that are unique to write or to read or to write into the brain or the nervous system. So it's very, 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 very sophisticated what's ongoing. It's very sophisticated. And so just sit tight. Here we go. Let's move on. Patel is into phase 2, and there's some key takeaways out of this, right? Mm-hmm. So in phase 2, they were going to focus on maturing the capability of the magnetoelectric nanotransducers for writing information to the brain and advancing the construction and testing of external writing interfaces. Advancing the construction and testing of external writing interfaces. So what does this look like? This is going to be an electromagnetic or a light-based or an ultrasonic-based system or a combination thereof. And this is where the partnerships are occurring, because you have Rice University that we just looked at, for example, who has been working on other technologies that are going to cross-apply. So they could just go get the helmet that Rice University was using and share it.
And so that whole let's go have another conversation in the other room when they project these programs out to these universities. Yeah, that's where the NDAs come out, which is what was on my mind earlier, right? That's when those come out. And that's when these other projects like Shark Teeth behind the scenes, man, are ongoing. Well, let's put this together and that together and this together and that together. We did it to a mouse and now let's do it to a zebra and let's do it to a freaking monkey, because let's stop right here. Let's see what happens. And in 30 days later, they'll know how much you thought about it, who you told, and whatever. And if you pass that stupid little test, then you go back and have another conversation. Say, you see this big building here? Yeah, let's go down about 10 floors. Anyway, I'm just imagining in story time right now. So let's move on. Phase 3 in this article, right? If selected for phase 3, and they will be because it's Battelle, they've been around forever.
I just got to say one thing.
Yeah.
Don't anybody be intimidated by any of this stuff. Knowledge is power. Fear is the tool of the others to inhibit and oppress learning. And
I can deliver this to you. I can deliver this to you and put you to sleep if you want. But the reality is the human organism understands shock.
That's not addressed at you. That's just generally addressed at how we can move forward in empowerment.
That wasn't addressed at you. I'm addressing that to anybody out there listening who might be like, I'm shocked, right? Shocked, right?
Yeah, good. It's not that bad. It's not that bad
because this is entertaining. This is just entertaining.
Yep.
Right? Yep. Who wouldn't want to, log into somebody else's brain and completely screw up somebody else's family? I'm just saying. So phase 3, Battelle's team would execute a Food and Drug Administration approved regulatory strategy. So now we go back to something like where Elon Musk has been talking about. So you have Elon Musk, who's subsidized by the government. And here's where this all kind of plays into this larger MIA complex, military, industrial, academic complex. If Elon Musk has been given deals to keep his companies afloat and mainline pretty advanced technologies and develop factories that can immediately be retooled for things like ventilators or rocket ships, cool. Good for you, Elon. What he's also doing is doing things like normalizing and working through the red tape, going through the expense of all of this bullshit with something like the FDA so that a company like Battelle can go, I don't have to spend $8 million going through those hurdles. You did this and this and this and this and this worked and that worked and cool. Thanks. Let's shake hands. Guess what? Now when SpaceX gets to put an astronaut out, Elon gets to use the technology.
Of course.
And round and round and round we go, folks.
Yep.
So anyway, Food and Drug Administration regulatory approved. Approximately 12 months from now, they'll be into phase 3, and then we'll start seeing the stuff maybe going public. Brain Initiative and DARPA, and here's where I think we might want to stop today, even though we have so many more things to talk about. Yeah, we're almost done. We might want to spend a whole show on this. DARPA and the Brain Initiative.
We got about 20 minutes. Let me check.
Yeah. We're good.
We got 25.
20 minutes.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. We're doing good. So the Brain Initiative. And if you haven't seen what the Brain Initiative is, I'll show you this page and you can research this for yourself. It's through the NIH, or this is the NIH page for the Brain Initiative, excuse me. This was initiated in 2013 under the Obama administration to partner military and science through the government to unlock the secrets of the brain, right? And so I went and found this one day and was closing tabs and found this recently and wanted to share this with you. And so these are research project grants, and all of these say no clinical trials allowed. And what you see here is transformative technologies for recording and modulation in the nervous system, approaches for recording and modulation in the nervous system, no clinical trials allowed. Models and methods for analysis of complex data from the brain, no clinical trials allowed. Sure. Targeted brain circuit projects, clinical trials not allowed. Targeted brain circuit planning projects, Brain Initiative data, integration and analysis. Notice what this is. What this is the government science academic repository that has a whole bunch of money that is able to work in conjunction with organizations like DARPA and IARPA to help work the college academic system, in addition to the corporations that partner with the schools. And so what corporations have in their academic resource pools are different than what institutions, meaning colleges, have in their academic resource pools. Laboratories, repositories of information, licensed intellectual property, all of it. And all of this stuff is for sale to the highest bidder, right, through special access programs as a result of the passing of the 1995 Technology Transfer Act, which was followed, maybe a Freudian slip, it was followed with the 1996 Telecommunications Act. And what that did was open up wireless communications in the television and mobile communications space to enable what we see today. The systems in place today are regulated the exact same way as back in 1996, minus a few superficial changes that did nothing in my view, but leverage and deleverage specific industrial tycoons because somebody greased the wheels along the way. Nothing more. And ultimately, we're at the point now where brains are going to be turning into cell phones on the network. Because we only have 20 minutes left, Indy, I'm going to save the this DARPA sheet for later.
Yeah, that's good.
Because we need to have a sidebar.
We don't have enough time to unpack that in this brief period of time.
There's a lot of cool stuff in here. And it's in the spreadsheet if you want to get a head start. But non-invasive deep brain stimulation with temporally interfering electric fields. And this is where all this talk about the electric fields and the manipulation and all that, that's how the brain really works. And so how do you move energy around in the brain and understand electricity? How do you convert electricity into another form of energy or vice versa, convert some form of energy into electricity? So you have in this paper discussion about using very sophisticated electrodes, 4 of them, and then regulating the current between the 2 electrodes, right? And then having the 2 different electrical fields that you see here interact with each other at specific points in the brain, creating focus and creating precision and creating time. And what they did in this paper was create an interfering beat frequency of 10 hertz. And they were able to get the brain to entrain in a rat. They were able to get brainwave entrainment, right? This way. This is what they were able to. So now we're going to go back full circle. You have got DARPA working on systems that want to put a minimum of 16 points in the brain to do things like create interfering electric fields in many different centers at the same time so that you can create complex resonant frequencies, complex resonant structures in the brain to override just about anything. And so when we start talking about software in this Wetware model, when we start talking about software, I'll show you some examples of what that looks like with the use of ECOG arrays and deep brain stimulation. But I need to illustrate as best I can what is coming online that takes the place of opening up your head and putting a giant spike in it and delivering electricity. It's much more sophisticated than that. They're able to grow stuff in your body and talk to it and make it send or receive electricity in and out of your body. They can do this now with genetics. And this is where this is all going. So I want to drop share real fast. And I want to reshare something else with you because it's kind of important. And here is why. That paper I just showed you, right? That paper I just showed you came with cute little fluffy videos. And this is what they can do with interfering frequencies in the brain, right? Let me know if you can see this. Let me know if you can see this through the...
You know how a lot of these things, it has very nice, pleasing music in the background, and there's a well-trained speaker talking proactively about all the good stuff. Yeah, cushy, fluffy, puffy, happy.
I want to make sure that this shares properly.
That looks like a happy mouse right there. That mouse looks happy.
Yeah, it's relatively, it's probably sedated, or it's probably sedated. It has to be. So they've completely locked this guy down. And then what they're doing is they're introducing a 2000 hertz and 2001 hertz, and they're oscillating his paw at 1 oscillation per second.
Yep.
Right. And so now they're doing 2000 hertz and 2005 hertz, and you're going to see a 5 pulses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 per second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they are making this rat's arm move.
put a guitar in that mouse's paws and write a program so it can play Smoke on the Water.
Yeah, here's 10 hertz. That's a 10 hertz frequency. So
wow.
this is accessing motor function of the whiskers and the right paw.
Here's the thing. There's a difference between what's fascinating and what just seems like, why are we doing this? You know, I mean, we're all wrestling with it. Okay, enough said.
Wow, it's still going. So here's what they're showing you here, and if you can see these videos if you go to the Telegram stream that I started, just look up t.me human internet, something like that. And what you're seeing here is them changing how much current goes back and forth, and then the interfering beat frequency. And so it affects things like how intense the muscle contracts and how many hits they get and all of that. So
can you put the chart of the frequencies back up there for a second so I can study those a little bit more? That went right by me. They had a little chart. Yeah, that right there.
We're going to watch a couple more. So here you go.
Kilohertz frequency.
Right. And so what they're doing is what they found is they use kilohertz, and in the paper they talk about higher kilohertz frequencies actually don't work as well. You have to overdrive the current, which isn't really good for the tissue.
Okay,
so
I saw it. That answered my question. Yep.
Good.
Go on.
So they found that this range right here works really, really well. And you can get these frequencies to manifest anywhere you want with something like a cell phone tower or something like a modern cell phone.
Absolutely.
Really what it is converging electromagnetic waves that create an interference pattern that generates a fringe field, an electric fringe field.
Well, there's a beat frequency between the two of them. In this case, the beat frequency was you're going faster than I can read.
No. I'm talking about something entirely. I'm talking about a directed energy system that would be able to replace the wire coming out of Homeboy's head here. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about converging millimeter waves or microwaves together to create an interfering frequency pattern that generates a fringe electric field that you could modulate at some hertz that passes through the body, right, at 100 hertz, but then oscillates at 8 or 10 hertz and do something just like this, especially if you have nanotech or genetic expressions in the brain.
But you need precise targeting in order to get it to do what you want, where you want.
Never mind. I'll state it this way: when you look at the laser array systems that work with something like Face ID on a cell phone, or when you look at a phased array system on something like a patch antenna chip that's only millimeter in size and has many, many, many antenna ports on it, you are able to create the interfering frequency patterns at the focality and locality that you're looking for, effective enough to do something like this, man. You absolutely are. These guys are just using 4 different probes and generating 2 electric fields in the brain, and they're able to make the whiskers and the paw move. This is like the difference between building a stick and mud hut with primitive tools versus a beautiful skyscraper in Dubai with the nanotech and genetic tech that's online now. So this is what I can find publicly to show you an overriding of a nervous system in a mouse. Oh, by the way, do you know that they frequently mutate mouses to express human brain cells in the mouse brain?
Yes. Yeah. That's an experimental tool. That's so that you can study a human brain while doing it.
Who knows? Who knows what's in that one?
Yep. Oh, you think that one's got some human brain in it?
I don't know. It's good for visual demonstration, but it's a true thing. It's a very true thing. You can look up chimeric mice, and they are frequently used. They are absolutely frequently used for animal model testing, especially when dealing with humans. Take the glial cells out of the brain cell subset and inject them into a cute little fluffy mouse, especially when they're a baby mouse pup, so that when the baby mouse pup grows and matures and their brain forms, the human glial cells, being bigger and stronger and more powerful, are able to take over the native mouse cells and express almost completely into the mouse brain. And then you do something like this. And then you do something like introduce magnetic nanotech, which we'll get into next week. And you can see where the rabbit trail, goes. All of this stuff for, intents and purposes, right? You can follow this feed, and here's what is going to ultimately start happening in the brain. And these dots don't necessarily move around in the brain. What these are representing is the various potential frequency patterns. It's just a generic visual diagram of what could potentially be going on biologically as a neural network in your brain. There are 12 points. There are 12 dots that you see here. They want a minimum of 16 with a subset of 32 channels minimum per 16. So that's 2 channels per cubic millimeter of space. They want a channel in and a channel out basically as a minimum requirement for each of the 16 cubic millimeter spaces in the brain to deposit nanotech, whether it be synthetic or genetic. And they
Very powerful.
You can think about the cymatic patterns with electricity or with ultrasound or whatever, right? You could genetically express things that resonate when you hit them with electromagnetic energy so that they actually vibrate. They don't necessarily need to like eject or elicit an electrical expression. They can express light. They could express a vibration. They could express magnetism. The genetic code it can do anything. And the question is, how sophisticated are we at? And when you start looking at the cymatic resonances that are going to be possible across the different hemispheres, astral projection and interdimensional communication almost seems possible if you believe in that stuff. And we're here. We're at the point now where like we're at this influx point where if this stuff is really true and there is this interdimensional thing going on, then we're really like at the point where we're going to manifest mechanical actuation over that throughout the entire species. And that's like handing a kid an open container of plutonium and say, don't drop this.
Don't drink it either. Yeah. This is the thing.
What's happening right now.
This is the thing, though. Okay, we're showing you all sorts of really cool technology, but we are so far advanced beyond this technology, but we don't even know it. It's like we don't know how to use it. I suggest all these crazy things like explore your spiritual center, meditate, I would say awareness and presencing exercises for yourself in whatever form you choose. There's a whole lot about those 68 billion neurons and the 10,000 connections on average between all of them. There is so much about that. And there are, of course, the more that we learn, we'll be reclaiming a whole lot of our own personal power for the good of all and for the good of ourselves and the security, safety, and well-being of our families, friends, children, and elderly.
Let's close with this.
For your entertainment.
Let's close with this.
The brain is an amazing and complex organ. And while many people are fascinated by the brain, they can't really tell you that much about the properties about how the brain works because we don't teach neuroscience in schools. And one of the reasons why is that the equipment is so complex and so expensive that it's really only done at major universities and large institutions. And so in order to be able to access the brain, you really need to, dedicate your life and spend 6.5 years as a graduate student just to become a neuroscientist to get access to these tools. And that's a shame because 1 out of 5 of us, that's 20% of the entire world, will have a neurological disorder. And there are 0 cures for these diseases. And so it seems that what we should be doing is sort of reaching back earlier in the education process and sort of teaching students about neuroscience, and so that in the future they may be thinking about possibly becoming a brain scientist. And so when I was a graduate student, my lab mate Tim Marzullo and myself decided that, what if we took this complex equipment that we have for studying the brain and made it simple enough and affordable enough that anyone, an amateur or a high school student could learn and actually participate in the discovery of neuroscience. And so we did just that. A few years ago, we started a company called Backyard Brains, and we make DIY neuroscience equipment. And I brought some here tonight, and I want to do some demonstrations. You guys want to see some? All right. So I need a volunteer. So right before, what is your name? All right, Sam. I'm going to record from your brain. Have you had this before? No. Okay. All right. I need you to stick out your arm for science. Roll up your sleeve a bit. All right. And so what I'm going to do, I'm putting electrodes on your arm, and you're probably wondering, I just said I'm going to record from your brain. What am I doing with your arm? Well, you have about 80 billion neurons inside your brain right now. They're sending electrical messages back and forth and chemical messages. But some of your neurons right here in your motor cortex are going to send messages down when you move your arm like this. It's going to go down across your corpus callosum, down onto your spinal cord, your lower motor neuron, out to your muscles here. And that is electrical discharge. It's going to be picked up by these electrodes right here.
Or your smartwatch.
We're going to be able to listen to exactly what your brain is going to be doing. So I'm going to turn this on for a second. Have you ever heard what your brain sounds like? No. All right, let's turn it on. So go ahead, whenever you, go ahead and squeeze your hand. All right, so what you're listening to, so this is your motor units that are happening right here. Okay, so let's take a look at it as well. So I'm going to stand over here. And I'm going to open up our app here. So now I want you to squeeze. Yeah, so right here, these are the motor units that are happening from her spinal cord out to her muscle right here. And as she's doing it, you're seeing the electrical activity that's happening here. We can even click here and try to see one of them. So keep doing it really, really hard. Yeah, so now we've paused on one motor action potential that's happening right now inside of your brain. Okay, do you guys want to see some more? All right. That's interesting, but let's get it better. Okay, I need one more volunteer. Okay, what is your name, sir? Miguel.
Pay attention.
You're going to stand right here. So Miguel, when you're moving your arm like this, your brain is sending a signal down to your muscles right here. I want you to move your arm as well. All right, so your brain is going to send a signal down to your muscles. And so it turns out that there is a nerve that's right here that runs up here that innervates these three fingers. And it's close enough to the skin that we might be able to stimulate that, so that we can do is copy your brain signal that's going out to your hand and inject it into your hand so that your hand will move when your brain tells your hand to move. And so in a sense, she will take away your free will and you will no longer have any control over this hand, okay? You with me? All right, so I just need to hook you up. All right, so I'm going to find your ulnar nerve, which is probably right around here. You don't know what you're signing up for when you come up and... So now I'm going to move away and I'm going to plug it into our human-to-human interface over here. Okay, so Sam wants you to squeeze your hand again. All right, do it again. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to hook you up over here so that you get the stimulus. It's going to feel a little bit weird at first. This is going to feel like a... You know, when you lose your free will and someone else becomes your agent, it does feel a bit strange. So I want you to relax your hand. All right, and Sam, you're with me? All right, so you're gonna squeeze. I'm not gonna turn it on yet, so go ahead and give it a squeeze. All right, so now, are you ready, Miguel?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, so I've turned it on, so go ahead and turn your hand. Do you feel that a little bit?
No.
Okay, do it again.
No, a little bit.
A little bit? Okay, so relax. No, hit it again. Okay. Oh, perfect, perfect. All right, so relax, do it again. All right, so now, all right, so right now, your brain is controlling your arm and it's also controlling his arm. So go ahead and just do it one more time. All right, so that's perfect. So now, what would happen if I took over my control of your hand, and so just relax your hand, what happens? Nothing. Why not? Because the brain has to do it. Now you do it again. All right, that's perfect. All right, well, thank you guys for being such a good sport. This is what's happening all across the world, electrophysiology, and we're going to bring on the neural revolution. Thank you.
That's where we're going.
There you go. All right. Cool.
Yeah, we'll
Interesting.
We'll catch up in a little bit and figure out what's next. But we need to talk about magnetic nanoparticles and flesh out more of the hardware.
Yep.
So anyway, thanks for.
All right. Well, that's coming up next. Be well.